I never would have thought I'd end up writing a book like Joe Faber and the Optimists. I was in the middle of a completely different project, a novel with a different atmosphere, different tone, different content matter completely, when my husband had a stroke. And our whole world, our whole lives changed overnight. And I knew from very early on that I'd end up writing about this because it was such an intense time, and I'd need to process it. Also, there was so much in those first few months that was happening that was actually very positive. You saw improvements. And of course, for me as a teacher, it was particularly interesting because I'd been banging on for years to my students, my sixth form tutees, about neuroplasticity and how repetition is learning and the brain's ability to adapt and all the rest of it. And here in front of my very eyes, my husband was having to relearn the simplest things, and he could. And I was watching him do it and seeing him work around problems. So everything in this book is made up, really. The story's made up, characters are made up, with one or two extensions of people I know, I suppose. And I did steal Terry's jokes, and you have to watch out for that, because if you're around writers and you say something funny, they may well just take it down and use it in evidence against you. But the one thing that's real in the book is the stroke. And the stroke that Joe Faber has is exactly like the stroke that my husband has. Time scales are our time scales. The sorts of things that happened and how he makes a recovery were very similar to Terry's. So they're totally modelled on that. But I made my character, my central character, Joe, a model maker, not just because of the manual dexterity that that job necessitates, but also I needed my main character to have an artist's eye. When you're immobilised, you don't have a great deal of agency. There's not very much that newly immobilised character can do. But my goodness, he can look. And I wanted my central character to have an artist's eye. So there's Joe, he's putting the Parthenon on the top of his model of ancient Athens when he has a stroke, it flies through the air, ends up in the bin, and that's the end of his career. I made Fran, who's another point of view character. Actually, I wanted the points of view in this novel to rotate so that you got a sense of how it was for everybody. I couldn't know exactly how it was for Joe. But I made his wife, Fran, a practical, scientific person. And her approach is to write a manifesto. If life's going to be different, I'm going to have to rise to that. This is how it's going to be. This is how I'm going to deal with it. And that's what she does. I made their daughter a musician. I wanted to explore the fact that a parent's illness is terribly unsettling, whatever age you are. It's very distressing. And I made their daughter Jess a musician because the way in which she manages or deals with her distress is through her art, which is playing the fiddle and composing. And the fourth point of view character is her boyfriend, Matt. He's a management trainer, so of course he's got all the theory on target setting and loads of really funny language. And also he's a little bit more removed, so as a character he's able to think things that people at a distance might think. Anyway, every stroke's different, but we were very lucky because in Terry's case he didn't lose his sense of humour, and even in A&E he was trying to crack jokes, and my Joe is a bit like that. And I'm just going to read you a tiny bit now. This is Joe, maybe 3-4 days after the stroke. He's beginning to come round, and he's been visited by his wife and his daughter, who are trying to encourage him and hey, you know, this is really good. You just had your teeth done, that's handy, and you'd had a haircut, which is, you know, all good news. It could have been worse. And here's how things turn out. Yes, but I'm paralysed. Paralysed. He couldn't explain how this felt, now that his thoughts ran so far ahead of his tongue. Wherever feeling had gone, a dead weight had replaced it. It took 2 people heaving up the slip sheet to help him sit up in bed. Since the bed was too short for him, he would gradually slide down it until his feet got mangled in the bars. He'd woken at night to find a long squidgy thing in the bed next to him, which turned out to be his right arm. He kept rolling onto it in his sleep and waking up with a lump in his back. The ward sister had warned him how important it was to reclaim the affected side. Look at your right arm, she said, and touch it. Rub it with the other hand. Look at your right leg. Touch it with the other foot. Help your brain to re-establish that it's part of you. According to her, some people actually banished the affected limbs completely from their consciousness. He'd adopted a more aggressive stance. Look at it. He stared at it. Stroke it. He pummeled it. Talk to it. Silently, he took it on. What are you doing there? Creeping up on me like that? Joe's patient notes in what looked like a big blue school register were marked confidential and kept conveniently above the bed in case anybody wanted to read them. Fran scanned them. There'd been very regular checks, she said, and already a knitting pattern was building up. There was nothing his wife loved better than hard data. You're not paralysed. Look, there's a key here. P for paralysed. You haven't got any P's in that column. He didn't believe her and had to see the chart for himself. P would mean there really can't be movement, but they told us right at the start your reflexes are normal. Your brain just isn't telling you to move. So what you're saying is, I'm lingering, malingering. He grinned at his own invention. Lingering was a fair description. I'm a lingerer, a loiterer. They'll run me in for loitering with a tent. It's your sense of humour that's lame, Dad, but then it was before. Joe recognised the verbal equivalent of a found object. Take, for example, Duchamp's urinal, or the Surrealist's famous bottle rack. You knew what it was, you just didn't know what it was doing in an art gallery. Similarly, his tongue was bumping into words which already had a perfect sense and function, but had no real business being in his mouth at the time. Pure dada, licence to talk tosh. He might as well enjoy it. Well, he does, and I hope you will too.